There are some position groups like linebacker where the Washington Commanders clearly got better this offseason, but then there's other areas like free safety where the team may be marching in place just a little bit. Did the Washington Commanders really get better on paper? That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, and I am your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering your Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, and I greatly appreciate you coming through for today's episode, especially all of the everydayers out there. On today's episode, we're discussing the roster changes on paper to figure out just how much better the Washington Commanders really got, again, on paper compared to where they left off in 2023. But first, we're going to start with the quarterback position. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase today. Terms apply. If you want to discuss this episode or anything else Washington Commanders related, or if you got questions you just simply need answered at any time of the day, text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders today. Become an insider from there. You can text me your questions, your responses, your conversation pieces, whatever you want, and I will text you my messages, responses, answers, and of course, live text from practices, games, all kinds of fun stuff, all of it delivered straight to your phone. No downloads, no hashtags, no filters required. So again, today's episode, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders roster. We know there's been a lot of changes on paper for this roster, but did they really get better, and where did they really get better? So we're going to break this down, and we're talking about improves, where they stayed the same, where they may have even regressed a little bit. And again, this is all on paper. We're getting ready for our second full practice of the OTA period coming up this week on Wednesday. So again, we'll have another opportunity to see this team on the field starting to put this product together. But this is projection season, right? It's all about what we think is going to happen. We've been talking about the schedule, talking about win-loss projections, what kind of product, what kind of result would make the Washington Commanders successful in their first year under Dan Quinn. So I wanted to kind of go down now and break down the roster. And of course, we're going to start with the most important position on the field, and that is the quarterback position. And we got to look at where this team may have gotten better on paper. And I'm trying to do this as definitive as I can. Now, some of this is just simply not definitive. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. But I want to be as definitive as I possibly can be. So I want to try to really kind of nail my opinions to the wall here for you. One, to give you some clarity into what we're talking about. Two, to give you some ammo to come back at me later if you really want to about what we're going to talk about here. So where did the Washington Commanders get better in the quarterback room? Well, to me, Jayden Daniels is an improvement over Sam Howell. Now, there's a caveat to this. Jayden Daniels is an improvement over Sam Howell, potentially, right? And that's kind of where the grain of salt has to come in. And that's where, like I said, I want to be as definitive as I can be here, but there are just some areas where we can't be yet. I haven't seen Jayden Daniels play an NFL game, but when you look at these two guys and their game and their skill set, let's start with the most obvious thing that just happens when you look at both these guys. Jayden Daniels is just simply taller. He's going to be able to see the field from a better angle. He's going to be able to see more of it. Not going to have to worry about his offensive lineman standing in front of him, defensive lineman batting balls down nearly as much. You know, again, if the ball gets batted down from Jayden Daniels, it's because of bad arm angles and throw trajectories and all those things. Those things can be fixed. Balls get batted down from guys like Sam Howell. Sometimes it's just because the dude is short, and there's only so much you can do to try to combat that. Then you look at the athleticism. Jayden Daniels, clearly far and away more athletic, more dynamic, more explosive as an athlete than Sam Howell. I think Sam certainly holds his own on the football field, certainly has an ability that could be tapped into. I think they should have tapped into it more last year. I really wanted to see more naked boots, more play action, more rollouts, things like that from under center from Sam Howell. Unfortunately, we didn't get it. Unfortunately, the Commanders didn't get it, and that's, you know, part of the reason why we are where we are today. But I think when you look at Jayden and you look at the ceiling and you look at Sam and you look at his ceiling, I think both these dudes could start in the NFL. I think both these dudes could have really long careers in the NFL if they stay healthy, knock on wood for both young guys. But I do think that Jayden Daniels' ceiling is higher. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and put Jayden Daniels over Sam Howell in the got better category in the quarterback room. Where do they stay the same? third quarterback, Jeff Driscoll, Jake Fromm, Sam Hartman. I don't know, guys. Maybe I'm being a little too pessimistic here. I think either way, all three guys are guys that you don't necessarily want to see on the field at any given time outside of holding the clipboard, warming up, and just being cool dudes to talk to, in the locker room and all that stuff. So I think third quarterback, basically, you stayed the same there. Where did they get worse? Backup quarterback. I think Marcus Mariota is a downgrade from Jacoby Brissett. Now, where Marcus Mariota could turn himself into an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett is his knowledge of Brian Johnson, the offensive pass game coordinator, assistant head coach, to Dan Quinn and all that stuff. So his ability to accelerate Jayden Daniels' learning, not just by showing him how to be a pro. Like Jacoby Brissett came in here, helped show Sam Howell how to be a pro. Obviously, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke had their first cracks at it, but Jacoby Brissett been around longer, been to more teams as well. But has kind of always been known as this consummate professional team player everywhere that he's gone. So you really like that about him and what he was able to teach Sam Howell. Marcus Mariota, look, there's been some stuff in Marcus's past, not quite Carson Wentz level of call it selfishness, but the whole thing of disappearing after getting benched from the Atlanta Falcons. Look, there's a lot of stories behind it. There's a lot of reasons for it. Some people say that if you know the real story, it's more than reasonable. Some people say dude still should have stayed with the team and not bailed the way that he did. I'll let you have that decision. But I think bottom line is outside of the potential of Marcus Mariota to keep or to accelerate Jayden Daniels' learning curve, especially with Coach Brian Johnson coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles, I think at the end of the day, if you got to put Marcus Mariota on the field or Jacoby Brissett on the field, which one do you feel most comfortable with? You feel more comfortable with Jacoby than you do Marcus. So I'm going to say that got worse there. Overall, I think the quarterback room is better in the long run. Might be not as better, not as better. I can't speak English today. Might not be as big an upgrade as we want it to be in the short term. I think in the early going, rookie quarterback, you kind of have to expect some bumps and bruises along the way. So I don't know if it's going to be a huge increase in 2024, and that's what we're trying to stick to. But I am going to give it just that hair of improvement. And I think a lot of that honestly has to do with the coaching staff. I think this coaching staff is going to cater to what their quarterback does really well, more than the last quarterback or the last coaching staff did with that quarterback. And I think that's kind of a real big reason. That's really the discriminator here. It's not so much the fact that I think Jayden Daniels' ceiling is higher than Sam Howell's, because I do. But again, we're talking about 2024 on paper, not 10 years from now, 5 years from now. So trying to keep it to 2024. The reason I still have the quarterback room as an improvement is because I think Marcus Mariota's ability to help Jayden Daniels learn the language, learn what's going to go on under Brian Johnson, the passing game coordinator, assistant head coach, is valuable. I think it's incredibly valuable. I think as backup quarterbacks go, it's more valuable than am I more comfortable seeing you on the field? Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, we don't want to see any backup quarterbacks on the field, right? And then two, I believe it more when I hear Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn talk about coaching these guys' strengths than I did last year. And I believed it last year. I believed when Eric Bieniemy was saying it last year, I bought into it. I was actually talking to somebody on the sideline of practice not that long ago, and I said it's amazing because we all bought into it. We all got really excited, and then we all got burned. And we all noticed fairly quickly in the season, you're not catering to your players' strengths the way that you said you were going to and the way you said that you like to. So after going through that, it's almost like an emotional abuse cycle. You almost kind of think that hearing the same kind of conversation now, we're like, I'm not going to buy into it so quickly. But with this coaching staff, for whatever reason, I still buy into it. I think they're actually going to do it. And because of that, I think that overall the product on the field is going to look better, even if, say, Jayden Daniels as an NFL quarterback isn't as polished, I guess, as Sam Howell was, even though Sam Howell certainly wasn't polished. So it's kind of a split hair situation. So like I said, there's a lot of kind of thin line walking here with this type of projection. So I do give the edge to the quarterback room being better this year than it was last year overall. So that's how we're going to break this thing down. Next up, we're going to talk about skill position players, receivers, running back, tight ends. Then we'll get into the trenches and the back end of the defense. All of that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Finding tickets to your favorite sporting event, music event, theater, whatever it is, can be incredibly frustrating at times, especially if you've never been to a venue. You don't know if the price you're paying for the ticket is worth the view that you're going to see. But our sponsors for today's episode, Game Time, help you take all the questions out of that ticket buying process, because they can take that nervousness away from you by showing you the views from your seat. So if you've never been to the Commanders' home stadium and you want to come to Landover, Maryland to see the Commanders' home opener against the New York Giants, you might be wondering, where are the good seats? Where are the best seats is this $64 ticket in section 413 going to be worth my money? Well, on Game Time, they show you the view from section 413. Maybe you want to dive a little bit deeper into the wallet, $141 tickets for section 117. They're going to show you the view from section 117. And they've got last minute deals that save you up to 60% on all of your sporting events, theater events, music events in your area. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen, your first view today and every day. Every day, make sure you come back tomorrow. We got a mailbag episode dropping for you tomorrow. So get those questions in, drop them in the YouTube comment section. Locked On Commanders Insiders. You know what to do. Text me your questions today. If you want to become an insider today, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to sign up for that today. In the meantime, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day that brings you the biggest stories without all the screaming that you're going to get on some of those other major channels. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, just like Locked On Commanders is continuing on with our roster evaluation, paper evaluation, right? Is the Washington Commanders roster really that much more improved right now than it was at the end of 2023? We talked about the quarterback position. And again, I'm trying to be as deliberate with these takes as I can be for you. But some of these things just kind of live in a gray area, especially when you got guys like Jayden Daniels who have yet to take an official NFL snap. Moving on to the wide receiver position, I'm a little bit more stubborn on this group. I'm a little bit more decisive with this group. Where did this team get better? Well, I think Luke McCaffrey is an improvement over De'Ami Brown. I think that Luke McCaffrey is more dynamic than De'Ami Brown. Certainly can do the deep ball thing, but I think certainly can operate in the short term, short part of the field, intermediate part of the passing game as well. Jamison Crowder and Olamide Zaccheaus over Dax Milne and, well, everybody else that was behind Dax Milne last year. I think those two guys are an improvement. Again, Jamison Crowder joined the team last year, still on the team, but I still look at this team. I say Jamison Crowder, Olamide Zaccheaus are an upgrade over what we had last year behind the main guys. Now, where did this wide receiver room get worse? Well, they lost Curtis Samuel. And to be quite honest with you, Curtis Samuel was the most dynamic receiver in the group last year. Didn't lead the team in all the categories, necessarily statistical categories and all that stuff. But if you watched every single game like I did, you came away from that season understanding that Curtis Samuel was the most dangerous wide receiver on a snap-to-snap basis in Eric Bieniemy's system. That versatility, that ability to work anywhere on the field, I think is incredibly valuable. They lost him to the Buffalo Bills. They did not replace him. So that is clearly, to me, where the Washington Commanders roster got worse. Where they stayed the same, you still got Terry McLaurin at number one. You still got Jahan Dotson at number two, which is great, but you still have a lack of height. You have a deficiency in height. And to me, that is a big problem for any NFL team. I think you need that tall guy, that ability to go up there, climb the ladder, do those things. This team simply does not have it. And to me, for all those reasons that we just talked about, the wide receiver room got worse in 2024 on paper than it did in 2023. Now, again, one practice in, well, two practices in really, but one full practice with everybody on the field, all the veterans and the rookies. Luke McCaffrey looked pretty stinking good. He got behind some guys more often than not. He was open for some passes that just didn't get seen in progression, and then he made, of course, the catch of the day. So certainly some good things out of young Luke McCaffrey so far, but I think when you got to look at the trio of Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Luke McCaffrey compared to Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, I think that we can all probably agree that the trio of McLaurin, Dotson, and Samuel, more dynamic, more versatile, more dangerous on paper than what Dotson, McLaurin, and McCaffrey look like right now. So we'll see if Luke can prove us wrong by the end of the season, but that's where it stands today, the wide receiver room getting worse. We got the quarterback room getting better, kind of, sort of, if you look at it from a certain lens, and then the wide receiver room, to me, getting worse, even though Luke is a upgrade over De'Ami Brown. I think the drop down in the true number 3 wide receiver position for Curtis Samuel is very significant. Tight end group, where they got better, tight end number 2, Ben Sinnott over John Bates. Look, I know right now Ben Sinnott's running with the rookies and running, not with the ones and all that stuff. I think we're looking at a Brian Robinson Jr. type of situation. I think by the end of the preseason, by the end of training camp even, Ben Sinnott's going to be the number 2 tight end in this Washington Commanders room. John Bates will be the number 3, and I think that is an improvement, and that is where this Washington Commanders team will get better. Where they got worse, nowhere. I mean, the depth is pretty much the same. Cole Turner's back there. Monty Rogers is back. You got some undrafted free agents that look kind of intriguing and something like that. So we'll see if those guys can make some more noise as we continue down this path. Where they stayed the same. Tight end number 1. You got an aging veteran with limited impactability, in my opinion. Until I see more from Zach Ertz and until we see the Zach Ertz is really, truly maybe better than Logan Thomas. I will say first practice on the field, he does look like he moves better. Made some catches that really made me kind of feel more confident than I did with Logan Thomas. So, one practice in, I will say that Zach Ertz does look like an improvement over Logan Thomas, but I think for the most part, you kind of just replaced one aging veteran with limited impactability with another one. We'll see. I think coaching is again, kind of go back to the Marcus Mariota effect. Zach Ertz knows Cliff Kingsbury. He knows his offense. He knows his language. He knows all that stuff. He's going to be able to help guys like Ben Sinnett, John Bates, Cole Turner get on the same page faster. Hopefully we'll be able to help Jayden Daniels get on the same page faster. So again, that extra ability could certainly make an impact. I think overall the unit got better, got more dynamic, got more dangerous. But I do see at the top a little bit of similarity between the 2 tight end number 1s, the one that we left last year with and the one that we've got right now. Moving on to the running back group, as we get through these skill position guys, where they got better, Austin Eckler versus Antonio Gibson. And to me, this kind of goes back again to the coaching staff. AG just wasn't used right, man. And we talked about it in preseason. He even talked about it himself. Antonio Gibson went on the team's own broadcast show and talked about how he expected to be used in more of a receiver role, like he's always wanted to be used in the NFL. Yeah, he can carry the ball, but he can also catch the ball more. And we thought we were going to see all this stuff, motion from the backfield into the slot, maybe even into the perimeter against a linebacker. Oh man, that'd be so much fun. Didn't see it, or at least didn't see it enough, or didn't see it often enough. So again, a lot of it might be usage, but I think Austin Eckler is going to be used a lot better by this coaching staff than Antonio Gibson was. Where they got worse, nowhere. Where they stayed the same, pretty much everywhere else. Chris Rodriguez is still your number 3 running back. I like him a lot. I think that's a good move overall. And then you got to say they got better. B-Rob is another year in. I think he's itching to do some damage on the field. Austin Eckler, I think, even if it's just because the coaching staff is going to use him more effectively than the last one used Antonio Gibson, I think it's an improvement. So I say your running back room got better. Now we get into some fun. Offensive line. Where did this offensive line get better? I think they got better at center. Tyler Biadasz over Nick Gates / Tyler Larson. I think it's important to remember Nick Gates is kind of a center convert, right? Started his career as a guard, became a center with the New York Giants, left the Giants really looking to try to be a center. What that tells me is there might have been some other issues there, but I think maybe the main crux is they didn't want him to be a center. They wanted him to be a guard. Nick Gates brought plenty of attitude into the position. A lot of guys were excited about it early on. I was excited about it early on. Still think Nick is a cool dude. Still a guy that I would hang out with any day of the week. But the play on the field just did not stand up. Brought in Tyler Larson to be the center, midway through the season or so. Got better, I think, but still not great. I think Tyler Biadasz, at a minimum, your more consistent is his more consistent play is going to be better than the consistent play we got out of Tyler Larson. I don't know that he has the same attitude level as a guy like Nick Gates, but I think you're going to trade a little bit more efficiency, a little bit more consistency from Tyler Biadasz than you got the attitude from Nick Gates. So I think the center position is an upgrade this year. Not saying it's all pro versus undrafted, but I do think it's an upgrade. I also think there's an upgrade this year at left guard, Nick Allegretti versus Chris Paul / Sadiq Charles. My biggest complaint with Chris Paul, Sadiq Charles has always been and will always be they are just too timid. Sadiq Charles no longer here. Chris Paul is still here. Haven't seen him doing a whole lot at practice with the 11-on-11s and all that stuff. Obviously no pads on yet, but something that just always stood out to me on Chris Paul about Chris Paul was always his just timidness. And we talked about that in some of the film studies we did this offseason. Insiders, you saw those, probably remember that. Left guard, Nick Allegretti. You are not going to have to worry about him being timid. This dude is 100 miles per hour every single snap, every single play. Even in practice, saw him just scream into the line for field goal drills. So left guard Nick Allegretti, I do think, is an upgrade on paper. Again, I'm not saying that Nick Allegretti is going to be an all-pro, but I do think he's an upgrade from what we saw last year. Where did they get worse? Right now, I'm going to put left tackle as getting worse. Cornelius Lucas / Brandon Coleman versus Charles Leno Jr. Brandon Coleman certainly has the opportunity and will have the opportunity to prove me wrong, and I look forward to it. I hope that he can certainly do it, but I just can't get behind this idea that Cornelius Lucas the team says they're more than happy starting him. I get Charles Leno had to have surgery and all that stuff, so maybe he was going to be downgraded and his talent was going to be degraded anyway. Got it. Maybe it's better than what they would have had if Charles Leno was still on this roster. Got it. Not necessarily disagreeing with the decision to move on from Charles Leno Jr. Just don't see what they have right now. Cornelius Lucas and Brandon Coleman. Again, Brandon Coleman, a little bit unfair. You know what I mean? Because there's not a lot to watch on him as far as NFL blocking is concerned. So it's very early in the process. Again, could turn me into a convert later on, but as of right now, I've got to go. It's only gotten worse because there's a chance that Cornelius Lucas might be starting. And no disrespect to Cornelius Lucas, really enjoy talking to him, but I just don't see it as an improvement over what we saw from Charles Leno Jr., to be honest with you. Where they stay the same, obviously, right guard Sam Cosmi, right tackle Andrew Wiley. Overall, right now I'm saying this offensive line is basically the same as what we saw last year. I do think it's going to be more aggressive. I do think it's going to be more consistent. So when you see the clean, it's going to be more consistently clean, but that left tackle spot really concerns me. We'll pick up with the defensive line and the defense and special teams on the other side of this message. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're doing this episode of Locked On Commanders thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. The Minnesota Timberwolves, led by young star Anthony Edwards, ousted my Denver Nuggets from the postseason. And for the 6th straight season, the NBA is going to crown a brand new champion. I've said it before. I thought the winner of that series was going to win the whole stinking thing. So I laid down $100 on the Timberwolves to win the NBA Finals. And if they win, I will get back $370 on that $100 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, your first view of the day, every day. Picking up with the defensive line. Where the D-line got better, to me, Dorrance Armstrong versus James Smith-Williams, I think is an improvement. Where they got worse, Cleveland Farrell versus Casey Toohill. Cleveland Farrell, I think, is stronger, but I think that's just what he is. He's just a guy who's going to stay because he's going to hold a spot. I think Casey Toohill a little bit more dynamic. Where they stayed the same, defensive tackle and depth. Again, Johnny Newton certainly has the potential to be better than what Phidarian Mathis has been, John Ridgeway, etc. But until we see it, it's going to be kind of hard to go ahead and chalk it up. Overall, I think this group stayed the same, maybe slightly better, but I don't think this group is better than the Chase Young-Montez Sweat combination, although I give a lot of that to Montez Sweat. If this was Montez Sweat and Dorrance Armstrong, I would be through the roof. I'll tell you that right now, guys. Dorrance Armstrong, very fun to watch on tape. Moving on to the linebackers, where the linebacker group got better everywhere, just about. Bobby Wagner versus Cody Barton, hands down, an improvement. Frankie Luvu versus nobody. I mean, they didn't really have a linebacker that does what Frankie Luvu does or the role that he plays in. So really, it's Frankie Luvu over nothing. So that just kind of shows you where the upgrade there. And then Jamin Davis as your number 3 linebacker. I think that's a better role for him. I think this less pressure, I think it's going to allow him to play a little bit more freely. Where they got worse, depth maybe, and honestly, the depth might just be a push. Anthony Pittman, Jordan McGee, are they going to be better than Khalil Hudson and Scooter Harris? I don't know yet. We'll see. Certainly some potential there. They're bigger guys than those two guys, so I think that kind of helps. But potentially got worse there just from lack of experience, right? Where they stayed the same, nowhere. Overall, the linebacker group got much better than they were last time we saw them. Onto the cornerback group, where they got better. Michael Davis versus Emmanuel Forbes. At least looking at his Chargers tape, you like Michael Davis more than you like Emmanuel Forbes. Whether it was scheme, whether it was coaching, whether it was confidence, whether it was all of the above, Emmanuel Forbes just did not look right last year. We'll see what he looks like this year. Already starting off kind of behind the power curve. Michael Davis certainly getting some opportunities in there. I don't think it's a huge upgrade necessarily until we see it better. But I think on paper, it does look like an upgrade. I don't think they got worse anywhere. Where they stayed the same, Benjamin St-Juste. And I think a lot of people could look at that and say that's a negative. Overall, I look at this cornerback group, and I think it basically stayed the same until we get to see a little bit more out of it. Nickel position. This is interesting. Where did the team get better? Well, Mike Sanders still is a nickel. Mike Sanders still is not maybe a free safety. He's not maybe a perimeter corner. He's not maybe a linebacker. He is a nickel. Like, bottom line, he is a nickel. So unlike last year where it was Quan Martin, he could play here, he could play there. Maybe Ben plays inside. Maybe Emmanuel plays inside. No, we have a nickel. He is a nickel. He's like Danny Johnson. He's just a nickel. He's a nickel cornerback. So I like that. That's an improvement to me. Where they got worse, nowhere, stayed the same. Still don't know where Quan Martin's going to play for sure in this defense. Overall, I'm giving this a TBD. I'm going to give this one a to be determined. We will see. I'm very excited for Mike Sanders still, but that alone, I just can't put it down as an improvement because, again, we've yet to see him against actual NFL competition. Safety position, where they got better, Derek Forrest is getting healthy. Quan Martin, maybe we'll get to focus on playing a specific position. Where they got worse, I can't say anywhere they got worse. Stayed the same. Jeremy Chin versus Cameron Curl. I think both those guys are very similar. I think Jeremy Chin definitely more of a box safety than Cam Curl was. Cam Curl more coverage ability than Jeremy Chin has, but I don't think Jeremy Chin is going to be asked to play in coverage as much as Cam Curl does, which is going to simplify things for him and perhaps make him look better. But I think, honestly, both those guys are pretty much on the same level. Depth obviously kind of stayed the same. Overall, I think the safety position, to me, it looks very similar to what we saw last year. Special teams, where they got better, kicker Brandon McManus had a better field goal make percentage, better extra point percentage than Joey Sly. So the math just simply tells you they got better there. They didn't get worse anywhere. They stayed the same. At return, the return specialists, I think, are basically the same. Jameson Crowder is going to get some burn there. Obviously, Emmanuel Forbes taking time, fielding some punts could be interesting. But I think overall, your return specialist game pretty much stayed the same. Long snapper Tyler Otts, I'm going to give it a push. Long snappers are never known unless they're terrible. So we're going to give long snapper Tyler Ott a push there. And then overall, I'm going to say that they stayed the same. The improvement from Brandon McManus to Joey Sly, not enough to tilt the scales. Obviously, Tress Way, the punter extraordinaire, is still on the team. So according to my estimations here on paper, 4 position groups, Washington Commanders got better in quarterback, even if that's an eventual, it got better. Tight end, running back, linebacker. Where they got worse, only one group on paper got worse in my eyes, wide receiver. They stayed the same in 5 areas. Offensive line, D-line, which are 2 critical areas, which you kind of feel bad about them saying the same in both those areas. So hopefully I'm wrong in those areas and they actually improved. Cornerback, safety, special teams, and then TBD, we're going to go nickel. So maybe if that proves to be an improvement, then that'll be 5 got betters. If it proves to be the same, 5 stayed the, or 6 stayed the same, and more so stayed the same than they did anything else. I think obviously the coaching staff got better. I think that is a big part of this equation, which could help make the team overall look better this coming season. The thing that I don't like about the improvement areas, the 4 areas where they got better, quarterback, tight end, running back, linebacker, when you look at the improvements they made outside of Jayden Daniels, Ben Sinnott, and maybe Frankie Luvu, all your improvements you're talking about are very temporary. Austin Eckler is temporary. Zach Ertz is temporary. Bobby Wagner is temporary. So the 4 areas that I have them improving, just clearly improving in on paper this season, before we even see him take an NFL snap, 4 areas that I say, boom, I think, you know, the most confidence I can give you in May on paper, those 4 areas they got better in. A lot of that improvement is temporary. So we will see if anybody can surprise. We will see if this coaching staff can turn that temporary success into some long-term success. But that is my view of the Washington Commanders 2024 roster on paper versus 2023. Last time we saw them at 1 to-dos before we got too many practices in, because once we get some practices in, guys, the hype trains get rolling. Ben Sinnott goes and makes another catch. Luke McCaffrey makes another diving catch. And next thing you know, we're talking about these rookies being all pros in their first year. Don't think we'll get that crazy with it, but you never know. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have a mailbag episode. So if you have questions for that, please drop them in the YouTube comment section. Insiders, text me directly, send me your questions. And as you know, you always have priority. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders if you want to get in on that fun today. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.